Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Malor.
Today's episode is called, Instead of Positano, Try Scario.
It's like a fun dish.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of sound like food, but they're not, in fact. They are cities in Italy.
They are.
And this is the first episode in a series that we're going to be doing, a non-consecutive series of alternatives to sort of highly touristed towns.
Sort of going off the back of our over-tourism episodes, we've talked about that in the past a couple of times. One thing that we've been interested in for the past few months, I'd say, is can we supply alternatives to not necessarily just over-touristed places, but highly trafficked places, especially as we've mentioned previously, this sort of idea of the peak season and then off season is disappearing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of becoming shoulder season, peak season. And it's kind of becoming a bit of a nightmare to go to some places in the off season, mainly because the infrastructure for tourism only exists in the peak season, if that makes sense. Positano, Amalfi being one of these places. So we figured, what if we start suggesting alternatives? And this could be for those of you who are wanting to come back to Italy. You've been to Italy before. You've seen the Amalfi Coast. You've seen Venice. You've seen Siena. You've seen Florence. And you're like, what else is there? But it's kind of hard to know what to look for if you don't know what to look for, if that makes sense. Like you don't know what you don't know. Like what are other towns that look like Siena or that have the same feel as Milan, Torino, Bolzano, something like that. So this entire series, and there will be some articles, I think, that will, not in this episode specifically, but over the next 6 months, basically, as we do this very loose, very non-sequitur series, that will sort of accompany them. Sort of just and this one will be instead of a Positano, try Scario.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know, like Nathaniel said, it comes up a lot in our episodes, and obviously you're all probably seeing it in the news. It happens every year. A lot of Europe talks about over-tourism, and we don't want to just complain. We want to give you guys something actionable, but also it's an opportunity to tell you about lesser-known places that we happen to know about, which is super cool to be able to share that with you all.
Yeah, and the two, like, just want to, for those of you who are interested, the two things we're going to aim for are the two tenets of this idea is, one, there are multiple places. Some places will have multiple alternatives. Like Positano will have multiple alternatives. It is a seaside beach town. There are going to be many places in Italy that are seaside beach towns. On the other hand, there are places like Venice that are going to have very few, if any, alternatives. I mean, it's Venice. So when we talk about a place like Venice, we are probably going to say stuff like, if you take out the canals, or something like that, what are you left with? Or if you take out this thing, what are you actually left with? And that is kind of where we're going to be coming from in some of these. And again, it's a little bit not perfect, I guess. But it's more of a trying to encourage all of our listeners, all of you, to maybe explore other places, not just to increase tourism in other parts of Italy, but also for yourself. And again, this episode will be about Scario, which we went to 2 days after Positano. And it was a night and day difference between the two places, despite the fact they are, incredibly similar on the surface and even a little bit beneath the surface. It's just one has, it was not shoulder to shoulder. One was packed and the other one was empty. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that we wanted to mention very briefly is, you might have already noticed, this is a shorter episode. It's going to be part 1. Part 2 will be coming out, pretty much as you listen to this, part 2 will be out as well. We've noticed that in the travel podcast category, most episodes tend to be between like 20 and 40 minutes, so an average of 30 minutes. And we tend to have an average of an hour, anywhere between 50 minutes and 100, and an hour and 10 minutes, so 70 minutes. And we want to bring that down a little bit. We've tried sort of editing out a lot of the tangents and this and that, and it doesn't work as well. It's still a long episode. It's still a 50-minute episode, but now it just sounds more stilted. It sounds a little bit more like we wrote down a script and we're recording it. And at a certain point for us, that kind of felt like, what's the point of that if we're just reading from a script and we're not actually, I don't know, it doesn't feel like we're engaging each other.
Yeah, and we still want to talk to you all as friends and not be sort of like bullet pointy about this, but we want to bring you just as much information. And the way we figured out to do that is to keep the same amount of information, essentially the same amount of time every week. You're still going to get an hour's worth of podcast, but we're going to break it up into at least 2 parts, essentially, so that, like, for instance, if you're in your car and you only have 20 or 30 minutes to listen, you can listen to part 1. when you're cooking or anything like else, what are words? You can listen to part 2. Basically, we just want to break it up in a way that is more
conducive, I guess, to
yeah,
like you
more
all
bite size.
for bite, yeah, and in that way too, if it doesn't feel as like, oh, an hour, I only have like 20 minutes to listen to it. I don't want to get stuck into an episode and then you forget about it, or you listen to half of it and then you're like, I can't remember what we talked about at the beginning. So we figured we'll just do these we'll make it a half hour. And the other thing is simply we noticed in the Positano episode, which is our last episode we put out, is that I think at around the 1 hour and 5 minute mark, we realized that if we aren't going to just sprint through everything, there's another 20 minutes of content to talk about. And if we were going to sprint through everything, it's like 12 to 15 minutes, but it basically felt a little bit limiting. We're like, well, we can't really like actually discuss what this thing means. We're just going to say this thing, moving on, that thing, moving on. And so we're like, oh, but if we split this into 30-minute episodes, we could have made that into three episodes instead of 1. And so it's the same amount of content. It's just maybe a little bit easier to digest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I like that bite size and digest. We're really all about food here.
Yeah. We don't have it.
So let us know what you prefer. If you prefer a 1 hour long episode, we'd love to know that. If you like the 30-minute bite-sized bits, please let us know. We're going to try this out for a while, and we really want to bring all of you the information in the best way that it works for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm struggling with words. It's a good thing that we're an audio-based medium.
Thank the Lord for that. The other thing is also, too, for those of you who have any feedback on... Essentially, our idea is to continue to put these out on Wednesday. So like we normally publish 11 o'clock Italy time. So if that is, so essentially it'd be like 11 and 11 to 30 with part 2 or something like that. That way it's not a giant, all 2 or 3 episodes all at once. But if we've considered maybe doing like part 1 on Monday and then part 2 on Wednesday or something like that. But we feel like a lot of these episodes, even this episode, or these 2 episodes today, would be a little bit weirder if they're broken up across multiple days.
Yeah, it's not our intention to make you all wait for more information.
Yeah, that feels just sort of unnecessary, like cliffhanger, come back next week. And it's just like, don't do that now. Just here, you can have it now kind of thing. So that all being said, if you have any questions about this, comments about it, any thoughts about it, we'd really, honestly, any feedback whatsoever around this, we'd really appreciate it. You can reach out on Instagram at Only a Bag Podcast. You can send us an email, onlybagpodcast@gmail.com. And we have a little sort of a send us a message box on our website, onlyabag.com. We also have a Blue Sky at Only a Bag, which you can send us a message. Plus, if you do listen on Spotify, you can actually leave a comment to this episode. Or any episodes that we will be putting out in the next, I think we're going to try this for 3 or 4 publication days, essentially. And I'd say 3 or 4 episodes, but it'll be now.
3 or 4 weeks.
Well, yeah, 3 or 4 weeks. There we go. So we're going to try it for 3 or 4 weeks and see how it goes and see if it's, see if we notice anything, see if y'all like it better, see if we get more positive sort of interaction, or if it stays the same, or if it, if people are like, oh, I liked it longer. I liked being able to put it on and go do something. So with all that being said, thank you all so much for listening to our ramblingness here, or like our housekeeping rambling. Likewise, if you'd like to follow us, you can do so on the Instagram that was aforementioned, the Blue Sky. You can follow along on Spotify or Apple. You can also leave us a review. We deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate the reviews. It helps us get seen, helps us be visible, and helps other people find us. Last but not least, if you'd like to donate to the podcast, which is the 2 of us, you can do so at ko-fi.com/onlyabag. The link is in the description. The donations will currently be going towards new microphones, so that way we sound better, I guess. It's sort of like it's been our goal for a while is to sound nicer.
And it will happen.
And then dictation classes at some point.
Sure.
Well, just for me, because I think I mumble my words together sometimes.
Perhaps. I know I definitely do.
So thank you all so much for listening. And without further ado, Darcy Melton, take it away, Scario.
So we're talking about Scario, and that is a town on the Cilento Coast. If you listened to a couple episodes ago, we had an episode on the Cilento Coast. We mentioned Scario briefly, and it's a town that we really enjoy. We've been there several times, and we went recently, as Nathaniel said, a couple of days after we visited Positano, and we went to a different beach than before, and it kind of really changed our perspective on the town.
For sure.
And so we want to share that with you. So let's talk about the general vibe of Scario.
Yeah. I like that.
It's very similar to Positano. As Nathaniel said, it's a seaside Italian town. It's not the same coast. They have different names. It's not the Amalfi Coast. It's the Cilento Coast. But it's the same
It's like,
western
yeah,
coastline.
and it also they're both on the same sea, the Mediterranean, rather than one being on the Adriatic. They are both very the landscape, if I may, the geography of the area is very similar. We're talking cliffs, we're talking rock, we're talking sort of pine trees, we're talking that same. I don't know. That same like very, very. I think I don't know about anything about wine, but people always like, oh, it has an old world quality to it. It has that sort of like
Yeah.
very old world quality, I'd say, to it. In the sense of it is just sort of very. I don't know. Even on the beaches, it's just a giant stone coming out of the water, and that under the water it's terrifying, and above the water it has trees growing on it. And you're just like, this is God's played here before. Sort of a very interesting feel to it, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in our next episode, the part 2 to this, we are going to talk more about the beaches. And the beaches, I would say, are different. And like you're talking about, like the gods have, participated in the, what is it? What is the word for geography? Terracing,
Like terraforming?
terraform. That's the word. Thank you.
I love it.
So anyways,
Geography terracing, though, is a great way to say it. I like that. It's like when you terrace the geography.
yeah. So the beaches are similar but different. We'll get into that later. And this town definitely has an old world feel. So there's the old part of town, which almost abruptly ends, and then it goes into the new part of town. But something a bit different from Positano is that most of the old part of town is fairly flat.
Yes,
At
100%.
least the whole not the front of town, the town along the seaside basically is very, very flat. There are some staircases up
Basically to the higher part, but the boardwalk itself is quite
Exactly.
flat. And where all the cafes and restaurants are all quite flat. And then, as you mentioned, yeah, there are always some staircases up, but it's almost like, I think where Positano was a little bit more winding road, winding footpaths, streets, not streets, even streets is it's giving a lot of credit, sidewalks and alleyways kind of thing up on top of a mountain. This is more like there's 2 or 3 streets carved into Scario, and then different kind of staircases up to each of the streets, and then there's of course houses, and some of them are nice though. Again, like sort of how if you've been to Sorrento, you'll get that feel in Sorrento. You're like, oh, this was clearly a wealthy part of Italy at some point, because it was where all the Napolitano families, if they were wealthy enough, they would have their sort of summer house in Sorrento. And Scario definitely has that sort of feel to it, because they're like, oh, now it's probably cut up into a hotel or into multiple family apartments, but you could tell originally that was one building, and it would have been just it still is a gorgeous building, and it has like a terrace, and it has this little garden and this and that. So you can definitely tell, and that's I think maybe one of the second or third comparisons there is a very similar amount of old world wealth to it, where Positano has a lot more new world wealth for sure. We talked about the yachts before. We talked about just the shopping, the art galleries, whatever. I think Scario's definitely got that feel of like, oh, at one point you were probably much more well-to-do than maybe some neighboring towns.
For sure. Absolutely. And thinking about like how it looks, it's such a big, I don't know, generic term, but it looks nice. Like they put in Scario, clearly there's an effort put into making things look cute. Like there's planter boxes and flowers, and I don't even know how to maybe describe this, but the cafes and the cafe tables and the umbrellas are of like a nice quality. Like they put effort into making it aesthetically pleasing, I guess is what I want to say, which is, no offense to other places in Italy, sometimes rare.
No,
so
very
it's
much
something to mention. It's to put it in like Instagram terms, it's very like, if you took a photo of it, your friends would be impressed.
Yes.
But it's not, obviously it's not just about taking a photo, it's about having an experience. And when you're in Scario compared to Positano, there's so many fewer people. It's still very lived in. It's not completely empty. It's not a ghost town, but you're not shoulder to shoulder in a crowd. There are a lot of people who actually live here. There are a lot of people, Italians, who travel to Scario to take their vacations. So it has just a more relaxed, but there's still energy in the town. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's also, I think, and it plays into it a lot, but I think the sort of, if you ask anybody who is Italian who's over the age of like 40, 45, I would say they remember a different type of beach vacation. It wasn't like we're going to go a day trip to the beach or even like an overnight. It was like, no, that was like you went and spent a week or two there. That was the summer vacation, the August vacation especially. Everybody had their own town. Sometimes you'd have a sort of a beach house and sometimes not. You'd just be renting. But it was sort of a load up the car, you get on the road. And this is especially before the South now has like the autostrad, the sort of the federal highway, for lack of a better word. It's we have highways, I guess, in America, they're federal highways, right? But we don't call them federal highways. It's just in my head, it's like a weird thing instead of state highways, I guess.
Yeah.
But my point is, it's like now it's all more connected. But I think even in like the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't really as connected. So you'd have to take the towns that go through, it's the roads that go through each and every town until you get to where you're going, basically. So I think it was such a pain to get to a place that you're going to spend a week or two there. So, and I think in Scario is the same thing, where that was almost like, it almost hasn't gotten used to the idea that people won't. So it's a much more slow pace. There's a less of an idea of like, do this, do this, do this, do this. It was much more like, you're here for like a couple of weeks, just chill out. Like, people are still working. And that was a big thing too. Like you mentioned, it's not, we like middle of the day, it was almost empty. Like there were definitely a couple of people walking around, and there were the bars and stuff were open, but it was more like, oh, people are at work. But
Right.
as soon as we got back from the beach at like 6:30, it was like, oh, this is a vibrant town. Like there are a bunch of people walking around, people having drinks, people having gelato, people just walking up and down the boardwalk.
Lots of kids. I feel like I say this a lot, and maybe I only say it to you, but there is such a sense I feel like, especially where we live, in the town where we live, but even in Scario, that it's like back in time. I mean, kids are riding their bikes around with no parents. They're just having a time. They've taken out their allowance. They're getting a slice of pizza for €1.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like, it's very 1980s in that way. Not like visually. It's not like that
No,
part of town
no.
looks like the 1980s. But it was just like, kids are just around. Families are out wandering around. And it's very, very relaxed and safe feeling.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's like, it's different than any other place I've been.
What's interesting too, and I guess this again plays into it because it is most, and again, for those of you listening, if you have families, especially if you're bringing kids, I know like where we live, there's definitely, and talking to people who speak English, who visit, especially in August or whatever, which is a big month to visit, there is a different feel here where it's like, yeah, your kids can just go out and be out all day, meet people, other kids in town, go do things. I mean, it's not like much stuff to do. It's just, again, you mentioned this 80s thing, or even like, I guess we grew up in the late 90s, late 2000s, where you'd be outside all day and then you come in when it's dinner time. And I think we are very fortunate. We're at the very end of that. Like, I think even people who are 5 years younger than us didn't get that experience of like, no, I was not, if I was outside, somebody had to know where I was at any given time.
Someone always knew where I was, but I was still allowed to be outside and go down the street and play with my friends and stuff. Yeah.
You had to like kind of shout through the window, I'm going to so-and-so's house. But I think there's still that feeling here very much. Like, it's almost not even so much that it's practiced, but it's more that it's expected that, yeah, you're going to be out. It's summer. Why would you be inside? You're going to be outside all day. And I think in places like Scario, it's very much more understood that you're going to just be out and doing stuff and going to the beach and hanging with friends. So I think that's also the sign, at least for us, of a vibrant town, if that makes sense. Like, I think
like usually a living town.
Yeah. I mean, anytime there are kids in any town, I think it's always a sign of a vibrant town, because I don't know. I think there's so many towns that are now like young professionals, or it's digital nomads, or it's I think when you have kids, you have to have like infrastructure. So it's like schools, it's jobs to support, it's like, there's the infrastructure around them that makes it like, oh, this is much more vibrant than just like, oh, you have like the 3 like, co-working spaces and then like a bunch of like smoothie shops or something.
Or an old, like where we live right now, a lot of families have moved out and a lot of young people have moved out to bigger cities. So It's almost like it's only older people largely left in these small towns. But this one really it's popping.
And as you mentioned, so just also kind of going into that thing of like, you mentioned earlier, ready for tourism. And you mentioned, so essentially just on that note, it's like, it is rare. I will say it's quite rare. So the entire boardwalk is sort of like oleander trees, like trees instead of bushes. There's also these pink peppercorn trees, which are obviously not indigenous at all to Italy, but they're gorgeous and they have peppercorns on them. But no, there's the geraniums that it's almost like there's a housing association, HOA, housing area, OPER, something association, whatever that stands for, home ownership association, probably. And because it's like almost like they're told, as you mentioned too, getting the nice tents, getting the nice tables. They're different, but they're all nice. It's like, clearly it's not the cheapest one that was sold at Sam's Club or whatever it is. There's no Sam's Club here, but you get the point. And no, they do make an effort with the entire stretch. And even the staircases going up into the streets above, all of them have plants along the side. It's like, again, it's on one hand, I think, like you mentioned, it's quite Instagrammy, like in a certain sense, but because there's nobody there taking photos for Instagram,
It's just for them. Yeah,
it's just for them.
for looking
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
So there's a really genuine sense of like, oh, this is really like a pleasant, beautiful, hidden, not even hidden. I mean, again, it's known. It's just hidden from a lot of maybe American audiences, maybe even English speaking audiences in terms of like English and Australian, Canadian, American, just in terms of that's not a big place on people's list if they're coming, oh, I spent all this money to get here, I'm going to be going to Positano. But it's sort of like, and I know 100%, again, if it's like, I really need to see Positano, that makes sense. I also want to mention though, even the color palette of Scario is quite similar. It's the same sort of pastels. It's the same sort of light seaside colors that you would want to expect from a town. In the South, though, I will say there's also a traditional color scheme. You do see this in Positano and Amalfi Coast as well, but it's like if there's a two-story building, it's usually yellow on the bottom and red on the top, like a sort of a brick red, maybe a duskier red, not like not a vibrant Christmas red. And that's like all over the place in the South. That is like a traditional color scheme. So you'll see that as well in Scario. So the yellow on the bottom and then red on the top. Sometimes the building's blue or something, but it's just the feel when you're walking around like, this is actually really nice. Like they have it together, which is fun for us because I think, I don't know, there's not that many places that really try to bring people here. It's just places that like, well, of course you want to come here. We have a beach. I'm like, yeah.
It's also an interesting note too on tourism. So Rio Maggiore is one of the towns in Cinque Terre, and it is like the photo that you see of Cinque
Absolutely.
Terre. It's, the houses that kind of come down the cliff and they're all multicolored and it's beautiful. Absolutely, it's beautiful. But there are a lot of other towns that look quite similar and have a similar, like you're saying, the color scheme. Positano has beautiful colors. A lot of these, not just coastal towns, have beautiful colored buildings that are all, because of Italian architecture, touching and smushed together on a hill often.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame that other towns don't get the reputation for being as beautiful when they are. So it is. It's a beautiful town to walk around in. It's a beautiful town to look at. Like if you take a ferry or a boat out on the water, it's gorgeous to look at. Really, really pretty.
And I think last, before we get into how to get there, because now that we've been teasing how beautiful it is, I will also say that it's quite clean. That was a pleasant surprise. I expected it to
really
be.
was.
In the South, it's much more, and if you've been to Naples, you know what I'm talking about. But it's much more common for a place to be a little bit more, not even dirty, but like just not as tended to, not as cared about, maybe. Like, there's there's litter, there's things like that. It's just like, oh, it's not as, nobody really cares about taking care of the place. And you can tell in Scario, like, oh yeah, people actually care. Like it was clean. And even the water was clean, which usually the water is quite like, oh, there's this stuff that blew from the especially from the boardwalk will blow into the water, trash will blow into the water. But this is like, wow, there's like one or two little things, but not like tons. So all that being said, it's really quite gorgeous. We hope this has sold you on it, because now we're going to tell you how to get there.
Yeah, Nathaniel, you want to tell us how to get there?
Sure. It's quite easy, genuinely. It is not on a train path, which does, or path, what am I talking about? Train tracks. So it does make it a little bit more difficult to get to. I would almost say that makes it better, because when any of these towns are on a train tracks, train path, train line, there we go. It does make it, again, I think it's just harder to kind of create the same sense, because all of a sudden you can get overwhelmed by day trippers. For sure. So it does it makes it hard to sort of find that middle ground. I think Cinque Terre is like this. It is gorgeous, but because it's on a train line, it gets more sort of overwhelmed by day trippers. But it's not. So it's on you basically go to Sapri on the train. Because Sapri is on the fast train line, you can take Italo down there, you can take the Frecciarossa, you can take any of the fast trains, which those are literally the two. And then, or you can take, if you prefer, if you're like, you know what, I'm going to go traditional Italian style, take the Intercity or the Regionale, and it'll stop at every stop along the way. But to be fair, where the Frecciarossa and the Italo will mostly be in the mountain, like in a tunnel for most of it, and it'll come out here and there, but mostly in the tunnel. The Intercity and the Regionale will kind of not hug the coast, but it will spend more time along the coast, and it's a little bit more beautiful of a train trip. Like every time we've taken that, it's like, well, that was a really nice use of 4 hours, versus the Frecciarossa is quicker by a lot, by like it's 2 hours quicker, but you're just in a tunnel and all of a sudden, oh, we're here. And then from Sapri, which is where the train lets off, you get on a bus called the Curcio, Curcio, and it's a sort of a bus company in the south, mostly in Campania, and they connect you from like Naples to Salerno to a bunch of these small towns, and it's all in one ticket. So when you get to Sapri, you just show the Corcho bus your ticket and you're on board, and then I think 18 minutes later, 20 minutes later, you're in Scario. The other option is to rent a car. We've talked about this before. It's always I always hate recommending renting a car. It's almost like recommending like take a taxi, because it's like, yeah, no, I know that. That's the easy one. And unfortunately, it's a really valid option in the South, especially because, again, there is not as much connection. Like, I mean, and again, I say this like coming from an American point of view, where there's no connection. Right. Like, at least in Georgia, I mean, if you want to get anywhere, you can take the train. That's going to take all day. You can take a bus, and then you really don't want to. So it's kind of like driving is the default. Renting a car and driving is the default. And I think in Italy it's not. So it's always annoying to pitch it as an idea, but it's beautiful to drive down. It's just basically it's either through the coast or through mountain roads. It's absolutely gorgeous either way. You can rent a car in Salerno and bring it down. I think there are rental car places, even in Sapri, I believe there's rental car places. So you can even take the train down to rent a car and stay in the area. But there's plenty of places to park in Scario. There's both a parking lot that's, I think, $2.50 for the first 2 hours and 50 cents every hour afterwards. And then there's free parking around the town. So if you do happen to rent a car, not only can you use it to get there, but then you can use it to see the area.
And thinking about comparing it to Positano, it's like 8 or 10 euros per hour in Positano to park. And of course, it will be slightly different in other towns along the Amalfi Coast, which are similar to Positano, but it's still so much cheaper to pay to park in Scario,
yeah,
than it is in Positano.
Which
wildly
and
cheaper.
And it's free for motorcycles. So if you happen to be at least the paid parking lot, there's one major paid parking lot in town, which is hilariously like on the water. I always find that funny. I'm like, do you want a view from the parking lot? I don't get it. Like, why not put something else there? But it's free for motorcycles, and then it costs only for cars, which I thought was interesting. So if you happen to be renting a motorcycle and coming down instead, you can always do that. And I think the other thing we want to talk about in this episode was food.
Yeah. So y'all know we're always talking about food. Italians are always talking about food. Most of what Italians talk about is food.
Or weather.
If you learn it, I mean, on the bus, now that we speak Italian really well, and if you're like us and you're eavesdropping on conversations, 90% of the time, Italians are talking about food.
That is a big, yeah, to be fair, that's a big overhearing conversation, like either the menu of some place or the...
Yeah, and I don't know if it's more in the South. We are most of the time in the South. This is all to say that food here is very important. And in Scario, you can tell that people really restaurants take care in crafting their menus and making sure the ingredients are pretty local. Yeah. Which is not to say that everything you're going to eat at every restaurant was like made by hand by their grandma that day. But a lot of it is carefully chosen and local.
For sure.
In Scario, that means that if you eat fish or meat, tons of fish and seafood, which is fresh. And a lot of the pastas are even handmade. Again, not at every restaurant, but a lot of them are handmade. A lot of them are dishes that you would find in the cucina povera, like the poor kitchen, but elevated oftentimes.
Sure.
One of them is, what's it called?
Like lagana e ceci.
Yeah, which is like a wide pasta and what is ceci?
Chickpeas,
thank you. So yeah, it's interesting though. Again, when you compare that to Positano, no shade on Positano, but because it is so touristy, a lot of the restaurants have to tailor their menus to what tourists will like
and what they expect.
Exactly, but Scario doesn't have to do that. They're cooking for Italians, so you're more likely to get something that is, I know I say this word all the time, but more authentic and potentially more local, just because they're able to access those things.
For sure. It's also, I think, too, which is all to say, because it makes it just, in case anybody's hearing this and thinking like, oh, they're not going to do seafood dishes. They will still do the spaghetti with clams. They'll still do a lot of seafood dishes and fried seafood, things like that. It's just, there's also some things on the menu that are more like, this is what people would have eaten 60 years ago, 50 years ago, or 100 years ago. Not necessarily, these are the popular things. It's also, and again, just because we're talking about food, I also like to talk about pricing. It is about 10 euros, give or take, cheaper. When I looked at the nicest restaurant in Scario, just looking at their menu, and everything was about 10 euros cheaper than the average price in Positano. Not everything. I think some of their pasta dishes were like 15, which, and I think Positano started at 18. So it's like, okay, there's some similarities there. But again, this is that sort of comparing the nicest restaurant in Scario to the average restaurant in Positano. But then from there, obviously, it goes it goes down. I mean, it goes way, way down in price. This was just like the nice one along the water right in front of everything.
Exactly. And they're also, I feel in Scario, more sort of, it's not street food. It's also not fast food in the way that Americans think of it. But the arancini,
Yeah.
right? Little pizzas, calzone, things like that. There are a couple of places like that in Scario where you can just get a little something for like, I mean, certainly less than €5, but like €1 to €3 for
I
a
think the
little
pizza
bite.
place is €1, €1.50 for a slice of pizza, or the arancini were €1. So, and again, as you were talking about earlier, though, it's while some of their market are tourists, another large portion of the market are kids who are coming after school.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like they have to make sure that they have something for both.
And speaking of kids love gelato.
We all love gelato.
We
to be
all
fair.
love gelato. That was just a segue. Everybody
love
loves
it.
gelato. And sorbetto, if you're not a lactose indulger. And there are at least two
Kind
really
of a fun
good.
shirt, lactose indulger,
Oh, thanks.
or like a band name.
Yeah, like a weird band.
Yeah. Sort of after saying that, I'm like, maybe not.
So there are at least two gelato shops that have artisanal gelato, I will say. I think
Yes.
there are more gelato shops than that. And
Yes.
there's certainly bars where you can get like a popsicle and things like that. But at least two gelato shops, and they're on the main strip in the old part of town along the seaside that have great gelato. And what are they called?
Granita?
Granita, thank you.
Which is, to be a lot more Sicilian. And I know I've heard that in Sicily, it's going to be better granita. Like, it's a little bit more, it's somehow less icy and more slushy feeling. And the one in at least one of them in Scario was a little bit icier, and the other one was a little bit like, oh, that's actually really nice. That's like slushier.
Yeah, it's still nice. So granita is basically
Ice.
it's like shaved ice almost with some sort of flavoring, but it's not like a syrup flavoring.
Yeah. So the
It's not
coffee
like a
one
snow
has
cone.
coffee in it. The lemon one has lemon juice and sugar in it, or whatever it is.
They're lovely and refreshing, and by all accounts, yes, they are way better in Sicily. However, these are very
they're
nice.
phenomenal. And
Yeah.
especially after a day at the beach, it's just, I mean, it's because sometimes ice cream can a little be too sweet and too just even, I don't know, even the sorbetto can be like, that's a little too much, but the granita is perfect. You know, it comes in a little cup and a little spoon.
It's really lovely, and it was really affordable. It was like,
I think it was-
regular price.
Well, it was like $2.50 for the small. So, and I think again that's comparing the $3.50 in Positano. The only that from Positano it went up to like in $5 versus in, which I think there's it's quite similar. It's like euro cheaper essentially in Scario, but it was more about quality and then sizing. We mentioned in Positano we got a fairly large portion for $3.50, but it was almost like a fairly large portion of a decent, not amazing gelato, which is sort of like, okay, just not bad. I'm very particular, I will say.
For sure. And I think, like we said before in the Positano episode, that several of the gelato shops that we noticed, and the one that we went to, we got the lemon sorbetto, but the other gelatos didn't necessarily look artisanal as they said they were. For instance, the pistachio was green, and it should not be green, where these other gelato shops in Scario, you could tell that those were made there.
And again, it's the pistachio in both of them were a light brown, which is what pistachio color should be. So it's
the indicator.
It's a fun canary in the coal mine. And that being said, if you have a good palate, the fior di latte is another great one. Just as far as a taste, if you can, or the crema, which is, if you can taste the egg in the crema, it's fantastic. And I'm like, well, I don't like egg.
I know.
So I mean, I do, but not like I don't know. I don't love the flavor of egg.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
So much that I want to taste it.
And I guess our last point on comparing food is that there is, to me, well, not even to me, I think it's fact, there's just more access to grocery stores in
100%.
Scario.
100%.
Which makes obviously a lot of sense. Like, a lot of people actually live there. And if you're considering having a longer stay, I think, or even if not, I just feel like it's really important to have access to a grocery store, because as we said in the Positano episode, it felt like everything was monetized. What'd you say?
I think commodified.
Commodified. And it felt so hard to just get to a regular grocery store for a bottle of water or a little snack or anything like that. It kind of felt very hard to get to and far away, where in Scario, there are several grocery stores. So if you're thirsty, go get some water. If it's like a comfort for me to know that there's a place where I can go where things are affordable.
100%. No, and I think, and then we're going to mention the next episode that one of the things to do on some of these beaches is to bring lunch, because they are quite difficult to get to, like, otherwise. There's no restaurants or anything like that. So it's to bring food. And a big thing that people do, a lot of grocery stores, we've mentioned this before, a lot of grocery stores and bodegas and sort of alimentares sell sandwiches. Like they're at the deli counter. They'll have bread and they'll have cheese and they'll have the meats, and then you can just say, I want,
and vegetables sotto olio,
and vegetables
under oil.
under oil. So you can say, I want this bread with that cheese, that meat, and that vegetable, and they put it together. And there's usually a flat price. Sometimes they weigh things out. It depends which like some grocery stores we've been to will weigh out everything individually, and some grocery stores will just be like, no, it's a €4 sandwich, €3 sandwich, no matter what you get on it. So, or it scales up, but not like you're not paying €10 for something, if that makes sense. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next episode. But yes, that all happens at grocery stores, which in Scario, there are actual grocery stores rather than like, that was clearly, because the one in Positano was like, it was a grocery store and it still is, but it's almost more like it's just, I don't know. It's like essentially, I think I had the same feel in Siena is kind of what it was. I think it was a grocery store for local things. So it was really beautiful, but it's a lot more like, this is to look beautiful and not necessarily to be your place that you go every day and get things.
You're talking about the place called Delicatessen in Positano?
In Positano.
And it was like the one grocery store that you can find in town, where Scario has several.
So no, hopefully that'll help though if you're visiting. And I think last note, I just wanted to say we're already at 36 minutes for a 30-minute episode. But I did want to say, so half of Scario, as you mentioned, is the old kind of town. It very much clearly feels as if like in the 90s maybe, they allowed people to start building on a different side. So there's a very clear line of like, oh, that's slightly newer. And
I think there's like actually a road sort of that goes between
like the old town
and the new town.
Clearly the difference. And the only thing I want to mention is like in the touristy area, again, beautiful, lovely, great. In the other area,
touristy area,
not along the boardwalk and with all the gelato
like
shops,
the older part of town.
Yeah, but then the other side, because we've walked over there and stuff like that. We'll get like a Magnum ice cream bar or whatever. It's very much like, I would almost say like coming from Tybee Island, which is the beach near Savannah, Georgia. It's almost like a beach bum sort of vibe, if you will.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
It has a very much more like, there's like the Italian beach bum and there's the American beach bum, and I would say that the old part of Scario and a lot of the beaches in Scario are the Italian beach bum. Sort of just we'll explain more what that means in the next episode. But then this other half of Scario was more the American beach bum, like sort of very classic, like beach cooler, Budweiser hat, fishing, got a moped, which is not American, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's a very distinct feel of like, oh, you would be perfect. And like you'd fit in so well on Tybee Island. Like no one would bat an eye.
Yes, I had not thought about that. That is absolutely.
But it's not. Again, it's not bad.
It's
not bad. It's just much more. It's almost more like, I think they're both. I think Scario is like historically, even though it was wealthier, I think a lot of the people who lived there were more blue collar because it would have been more fisher people, like fishermen, or it would have been more construction and things like that. So I think there's still that vibe. So it's either like almost like you either did really well financially. Like, I mean, again, in the last 50 or 60 years, you retired, you bought a boat, you have a nice house, you're the Italian beach bum. Or it's, you didn't do as well, but you still live on the beach and you still go to the water every day. So it's just that sort of like perpetually tanned and perpetually, it's a very interesting different of vibe, if that makes sense. And I only say that too because it's interesting. Salerno is a lot like that, where you have the sort of like I don't know, the retired fisherman who is like more the Boston whaler versus like this sort of the little, wooden rowboat.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
I hope I'm making sense. It's like in my head, it's just funny because I think it's like in my head, the people who the Tybee Island beach bum is such a specific type. Because even in like New York, like on Fire Island, when we visit my grandparents, there's a different, very specific type.
Yes.
There's almost like the people in high school who grew up going to the beach and who are now in their 60s and 70s who still go to the beach, but as if they're in high school. So it's like they got the radio, they got this, they're going to be out, they're just sunning. There's no such thing as, sunscreen. It's beautiful. I love it. So it's just funny how like each different beach has their own different like
community.
Little the beach bum culture. And again, like the surfers versus the people who there's no surfing here. We're just going to sleep on the layout on the sun. So anyway, I'm going to get into more in the episode. Not really. We're going to talk more about beaches, but I'm sure this will come up. So, with that being said, this is the part 1 of Scario. We hope that it was somewhat enjoyable. I'm looking over at the time. We're at 39 minutes. Yeah, okay. Well, almost a 30-minute episode if you count the 8 minutes for the intro and the instead of and the whole fact that this will be a 30-minute episode. So, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in part 2. Tanti abbracci.